Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Mad Mouth, joined with Stuart Hack. What's up, Mr. Hack Attack?
Not too much, Scott.
And we have a special guest, Mark Rosenman. Mark, thank you for being on the broadcast tonight.
My pleasure, guys.
So, Stuart, take it away.
All right, Mark. You've written a bunch of books. Why don't we start with the last one? It's coming out. Tell us about it.
The last one is a companion to the one prior. It's you never forget your first. It's all about first in the New York Mets careers. We've interviewed over 40 some odd Mets, and it talks about draft day, the first minor league game, their first minor league manager, the day they were called up, their first at bat, first hit. If they're a pitcher, first batter they faced. We had done the last year one on the New York Rangers, similar, first games, first goals, first coaches, stuff like that, first playoff games. So this is a companion to that. It'd probably be out, January, February. It'll definitely be out by opening day for sure. So we're looking forward to that one. It's a lot of fun. Got to speak to two of the original Mets, actually three if you consider Ed Kranepool as well. So Ed Kranepool, Hobie Landreth, and Hobie Landreth actually was the first Met because he's the first Met drafted, and Frank Thomas. And that was pretty cool because both of them in the 90s, and their recall was unbelievable. Hobie Landreth was an absolute trip. Howie Rose did the forward to the book, so we're really excited about this one. I wrote this one with I have two different co-authors that I write with. This particular one was with Howie Carpin.
Was there
talk about Ed Kranepool a little bit. I'd like to hear a story or two about Ed Kranepool.
Well, so I can tell you stories, not so much about his first, because that's in the book, but I'll tell you a great Ed Kranepool story that goes back to my Howie Carpin and my second book, which was Down on the Corner, which is about Kiner's Corner. And Jerry Koosman tells a great story about Jerry Koosman was a practical joker on the Mets back then. And they had this thing, like if you had the sporting news back in the day, if you remember, this is, I'd say 1970-ish. In the back was this thing called Mr. Mike, and it was like a handheld wireless microphone that if you were like 30 feet from your radio and you tune the radio to a certain frequency and use the mic, it would come over that frequency on your radio. So Tom Seaver had the clubhouse's radio. He, in his locker, had the radio, and that was the one that everyone listened to. The Met producer at that time was Jason Alexander's cousin. I believe his name was Jack Simon. I might have his first name wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Jack Simon. Did a dead-on Howard Cosell impersonation. So Jerry Koosman wrote this whole script out, and he tells Jack Simon, listen, you're going to set up in the trainer's office, which was basically 15 feet from Tom Seaver's locker. He said, you're going to count to 20, and when you get to 20, you're going to read this. So Koosman sits him down in the trainer's office, and he walks out. He counts slowly. As he's walking to Tom Seaver's thing, he's counting his head, 5, 6. He gets to Seaver's locker, and he starts fiddling with the radio to get it to the frequency, and his head's still counting. He gets up to 20. He gets it to the frequency, and Jack Simon comes loud as can be in the Met locker room in Howard Cosell's voice. He goes, breaking news from the world of sports. The New York Mets have just traded Tom Seaver and Ed Kranepool to the Houston Astros for Doug Rader and a pitcher that the Mets always lit up. He said Seaver turned white. He said Kranepool went ballistic. He was throwing stuff, cursing, just going nuts. And Donald Grant happened to be in the locker room. He ran out of the locker room to find out what was going on. And the best part of that story is when Koosman saw all the turmoil that it caused, he ran in, told Jack Simon, don't say a word to anybody about this. He actually revealed it to Tom Seaver the first time Seaver was back as a Cincinnati Red, and they were both on Kiner's Corner. And as Koosman's telling the story, and they're zooming in on Jerry Koosman's face, Tom Seaver sees the monitor, and he leans in just at a camera shot and starts cursing Koosman in his ear while Koosman's telling the story. But, that's a pretty funny story about Eddie Kranepool, the way he reacted to the false trade. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, that is interesting. Ralph Kiner was involved in this whole thing too then?
No, Ralph Kiner was not. He was only the reveal came on the Kiner's Corner show.
Gotcha. Okay.
Ralph Kiner had a post-game show with the Mets for many years, and he usually have the star of the game. So this particular time, it was Seaver's return to Shea, and He
And
pitched
they both
against,
pitched against each other. Yeah, Seaver versus
they
Guzman.
figured it was apropos to put them both on together because they were buddies. They won a world championship, won a World Series. Mark, when you were interviewing all these people, was there anyone who surprised you in a certain way as far as personality that you weren't expecting? Sometimes you come in with perceptions of people and they come out totally different.
Any book in particular, or just all of them?
Mets, Rangers.
As far as the Rangers one, the Rangers and the Mets, I know a lot of these guys, so that's why I reached out to some of them. But again, Frank Thomas and Hobie Landreth actually just blew me away. Just their recall. Bobby File, I reached out to him. This book is a lot of the lesser known guys. We speak to Dick Rustick. Met fans might not even know who Dick Rustick is. Dick Rustick, won one game for the Mets, and but he was a great story. Just Ray Searage. I mean, it's just so many really interesting guys that Met fans might not remember. Terry Leach, just a great guy. I mean, all these guys were just, and they love retelling their stories. So it's pretty cool when you get to sit and talk. One of the guys who I had a great relationship with the Rangers, and people, that from the outside just think he's a total jerk, but I could speak to him for hours, and that's Sean Avery. And Sean Avery in the first book just was phenomenal. I mean, he just gave me some great stories because he had some unique first. I mean, he actually was his first movie role was in the movie about Rocket Richard. And this is before he was even a New York Ranger. He actually played a New York Ranger in the film. And he talked about the fact that the director and the producer wanted it to be so real that they were using equipment from the 60s, and he had to relearn how to skate with the different type of skates and learn how to stick handle with the wooden stick just for the realism. And he was just phenomenal. I mean, I thought he was a great interview. The 79 Ranger book was one of my favorites because that's the team that's before 94 is the name of that book. And because Howie Carpenter and I maintained that had the Rangers never won the Cup in 1994, not only would they have not been remembered, with high regard, they probably would have been remembered as one of the underachieving teams of history if they didn't win that Cup. But that 1979 team was just overachiever. So the premise of the book before 94 is pretty much the meaning that team could have been the most beloved team in Ranger history, even though they didn't win the Cup. And just speaking to guys like Bobby Sheehan is just a phenomenal storyteller. One of the stories he told in that book was in the minors, he had a run-in with a coach, and the coach had this specific curfew. And if you broke curfew, it was $100, a night. And, Sheehan was known for having women back in his room every night and breaking curfew all the time. And the coach knew, and he would do bed checks. And so he walked in and he banged on the door. He goes, Sheehan, I know you have someone in there. Open up the door. You broke curfew. Here, you need to be fined. So Sheehan opens the door. He goes, here's 100 for today, and here's 100 for tomorrow. Don't bother coming back tomorrow. So, but he told some great stories. Pat Hickey is a great storyteller. Pat Hickey told some phenomenal stories. So, everyone, I've been blessed with the people that I've spoken to for these books. They've really opened up and gave some really great stories.
I've got to say this, and I've covered sports for the better part of 40 years. When you go into an NHL locker room, an MLB clubhouse, the stories and the practical jokes that get played in those locker rooms. Because you got to remember, these guys are, at least with MLB, you have 162 game season. NHL, your brothers for like 80 some odd games, and let alone preseason. So I can appreciate that. Now, having covered the Mets from time to time in Port St. Lucie, Florida, I don't think there are too many better PR guys that are better than Jay Horowitz. I mean, Jay Horowitz to me is Mr. Met. If I ever saw, every time I've needed his help, he's been more than cooperative and one of the finer people you'll ever meet. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's now elevated to the head of the alumni, and he just handles all the weekends where he brings players back. Yeah, and yeah, I've known Jay since going back to like 1980. So yeah, Jay's been around a long, long time.
Yeah, Jay Horowitz reminds me of Lee Remmel, of the Green Bay Packers. I got to know Lee real well when I was covering the Lions on a regular basis. So you told me that, so you're a big Ranger guy. So you also work with Fred Sherrill. I imagine Phil Esposito's quite the character too, isn't he?
Yes, but that 79 team had a bunch of characters. Bobby Sheen, as I mentioned, then you had Ron Duguay, who, took New York by storm. The Swedes, Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nielsen and Espo, the Godfather line itself, Phil Esposito and the two Dons, Don Maloney and Don Murdoch. Don Murdoch's a great guy too. Espo, he grew to love New York. When he got here, he did not like it at all. I mean, he really hated it. But that team really, when they beat the Islanders, they owned New York, and it was tremendous. And just to hear the guys talk about, for the Stanley Cup Finals when Billy Joel singing the national anthem and just the goosebumps they got, back then. But, Espo was back then, what Messier was to that 94 team. He was the guy, like Reggie. He was the guy that stirred, the straw that stirred the drink for sure.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's unbelievable. You talk a little bit about Down on the Corner.
Down on the Corner. That's the 30 years of Kiner's Corner. Kiner's Corner was basically the first sports center, but but just a post-game show that really just focused on the game. And it was interesting because the guys who spoke to from the 60s talking about that show were just blown away because they didn't have access to videotape. So you had guys that, got a base hit and a home run and, they would never see it. And then they'd come in after the game. They'd sit in the studio, and Ralph would show them highlights of the game, or a pitcher, seeing his motion. It was things that never happened back in the day. But as we got more sophisticated, the show really never grew, and that was the charm of the show. It never really had all those bells and whistles that the shows of the late 70s and 80s did. It still was that throwback that we all grew up with. And you think about it, that most Met fans, Ralph Kiner and Kiner's Corner took them from the time they were 2 years old to the time they graduated college. I mean, that's how long that show was on. And the book came about by chance. It was the most bizarre thing. Howie and I had done Shoot to Thrill, which was a history of the NHL shootout in its 10th year. And it was an interesting book. It was a great project, and we had a lot of fun with it. I was moving, downsizing, because my kids are out of the house and everything. And we were getting ready to show the house. And there was a wall unit that I had built in, and we were taking it down to, just clear out some area. And on the top of this wall unit, I had all these old Betamax tapes, from the 70s and 80s. And, they all came tumbling down because I forgot they were there. And I reached down, and the very first one I picked up said, New York Mets, St. Louis Cardinals, opening day 1985. And by chance, I still had a Betamax deck in my garage. So this tape's all over the floor. I stopped what I was doing. And this was, mind you, a week after
Neil Allen, right?
Yes. It wasn't Neil Allen. I think it was Rick Ownby. It wasn't Ownby. I don't think it was Neil Allen. I'm not sure who it was. But so the bottom line is I run, and I'm saying to myself, please be there, please be there. I hook up the Betamax. I'm fast forwarding to the end of the game because I want to see if Kiner's Corner is there. And there it is in all its glory. And this was a week after Ralph passed away. And Ralph Kiner starts the show, and he goes, pleased to have as my guest here Mookie Wilson and Gary Cooper. And then he just, obviously the director said in his ear, it's Gary Carter. He goes, of course, Gary Carter, not Gary Cooper. He goes, but I'm going to tell you why I'm thinking it's Gary Cooper. He said, Glenn Close sang the national anthem today for opening day. And Glenn Close was in the movie The Natural, which reminded me of Pride of the Yankees, which reminds me of Gary Cooper. But that was Ralph in a nutshell. And to have that one as the first one was just unbelievable. So I called our publisher and I said, listen, Ralph just passed away. There's never been a book, solely. There's been plenty of books on Ralph Kiner, but never a book on Kiner's Corner in the show. I wanted to interview 10 guys from each era, over the 30 years and do that. We also debunked one of the famous Choo Choo Coleman lines. I reached out to Choo Choo Coleman. One of the stories that went on for years and years was, Choo Choo Coleman, Choo Choo's his nickname. So Ralph was trying to get his real name, and she goes, so, Choo Choo, what does your wife call you? He goes, she can call me anything as long as she doesn't call me late for dinner, what's her name? He goes, she's Mrs. Coleman, but Choo Choo Coleman said none of that ever happened. That became an urban myth. It was pretty funny. I actually, on our YouTube channel, have 30 episodes, different episodes over the years of Kindness Corner. They're not around. I mean, I was able to find all, through the internet, track down any one. The holy grail of them all, which I have not been able to find, is George Carlin was actually on Kindness Corner. And that's something I really would have loved to have seen, but I can't find that anywhere.
How did he end up getting on that show?
George Carlin was a Met fan. I think it was during the time where he had that bit where he was doing the differences between baseball and football and how baseball was so calm and football was so violent. And that was like one of his routines. So I think he, when he was in New York, he would take in Met games. In the first week, Buddy Hackett was on, and, it was pretty bad. Because I like Buddy Hack and I listened to it. It was pretty dull. I was shocked at that, but it was fun. It was a great project, especially Benny Ayala talks about him with such reverence because he was also his hitting instructor. So for him, it was a great honor because Benny Ayala hit a home run in his first at bat for the Mets, and he was on Kindness Corner that game, and kind of knew him from the time where he was his hitting instructor in the instructional league. Guys like Barry Lyons hit a home run on Mother's Day and was able to say Happy Mother's Day to his mother. So it was a lot of fun. It was a pretty cool project for sure.
I got to tell you, I like your backdrop, Madison Square Garden. It's a bucket list item for me, being an old Olympia Stadium guy. So what version of this? I know they've remodeled it quite a few times.
Ceiling is still pretty much the same. That's the 70s, but the ceiling they really haven't renovated other than taking out the scoreboard. The scoreboard is a much bigger scoreboard, but the colors are still there, and the ceiling from the world's most famous arena is still there. I don't know when we're going to get back to being able to go inside there. Hopefully soon. I do miss it. It's something different. Just the feeling's a little different when you're doing a Zoom interview post game as opposed to being in the locker room for sure.
I can only imagine. Well, it's definitely a bucket list.
What was your take on the 2020 baseball season?
Mixed. Listen, I don't like the 7-inning doubleheader. I don't like starting the runner at second base. I do like the fact that the National League finally went to the DH. I think that should be uniform. I think they did the best they could under extraordinary circumstances. I think of all the sports, though, it's the one that translates the worst on television with no fans. The NHL was seamless. The NHL, if you just tuned on, if you just landed from outer space and turned on a hockey game, you would have had no idea that there was a pandemic going on. And similar, I have to give the NBA credit. I'm not a big NBA guy anymore. Years ago, I was back in the Havlicek, the Willis Reed years. My focus is hockey, so I'll always watch a hockey game over basketball. But I will say that the ABC's coverage and the camera angles they had and the high def feel had that 70s texture to it, just the guys coming up the court and just the way they tracked. But baseball, even with the virtual fans or the cutouts, there was definitely something missing, even though the pipe didn't, there was just for me something missing. And I can't really put my finger on it. It was, it was also the sport that was really impacted first because, they stopped spring training. That was all of a sudden, all right, well, what's going on here? And then they started up, and it was just, for me, it was lacking. I think the playoffs, the added layer playoffs might in the long run be okay. I like the fact that baseball for all these years hasn't changed, and I saw it as a good thing. Some of the changes are good. The runner at second base, I hate. I just absolutely hate.
Everybody hates that.
It's silly. It's absolutely silly, and the 7-inning doubleheaders are silly too. And I'm surprised that Luis Rojas still has his job because if you really look at it, he had the opportunity because the Mets had a lot of off days due to scheduling and other teams having shut it down for COVID. He had the opportunity to use Jacob deGrom in 2 7-inning games, and he pushed him back a day and used him in a 9-inning game and lost the start. When you can use your best pitcher in baseball in a game that's only going 7 innings, and you can do that twice, you do that. Right. And he didn't do that. I'll give him a break. And Rojas, I wanted Rojas over Beltran, but that's almost a fireable offense. That is not, and again, they take a lot from the GM, so that could have been Brody's call, and Brody might have, taken the hit for that. So he's no longer here, and we'll see what happens on that.
Well, how much of a leash do you give Rojas for 2021?
What's that?
How much of a leash do you give Rojas for 2021, assuming they play 162?
Well, here's the rub on that. So he might not get that opportunity. Sandy did give him a vote of confidence, but Sandy did leave a little wiggle room, because if they do get a GM in there before the season starts and he's not his guy, he's going to have no wiggle room. He's going to have no wiggle room because he's not that new GM's guy. He's not Sandy Alderson's guy. So he's got really no wiggle room. And if they put these pieces in place like they're talking, Bauer's at the top of their list, and the news today with Robinson Cano puts DJ LeMahieu right on their list as well. So if you add a LeMahieu and a Bauer to that team already, and you play the DH again, and you're going to have Dom Smith and Pete Alonso in the lineup every day with Conforto as well, you got a pretty formidable team there. It remains to be seen. There are a couple of moves I'd rather see, and I don't know if they're going to. I know Lindor has been a player that mentioned a lot. Lindor's not the guy I target. I target Arenado. I mean, he is top 5 in the game. I know people point to his splits, Coors Field, and are a little weary about that. Guy's a Gold Glover, third base. I like J.D. Davis. J.D. Davis is not a great fielder. He's got a great arm, but he would be a piece that would go to Colorado, and he would hit a lot of home runs in Colorado, J.D. Davis. And they have flexibility. Listen, they have 3 young shortstops that all are major league ready. So the Mets can trade that and still not weaken the position. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in this offseason. And if Steve Cohen's press conference is any indication of where he wants to be, I don't give Rojas a lot of wiggle room. He's in a win-now situation because you got similar to what the New York Rangers had with Henrik Lundqvist. The window is slowly but surely closing. You have Jacob deGrom. You got 3 years of deGrom. You got to get to the World Series with deGrom and win one.
Well, Robinson Cano, I get being suspended for a year. That to me might almost be a blessing in disguise, because when you brought up DJ LeMahieu going to the Mets, and I had a chance to write a story on DJ LeMahieu when he was with the Rockies out in the Cactus League. He's from my neck of the woods back in Metro Detroit. He could be quite a fine addition to the Mets. I really think he could.
Oh, listen. If you get DJ LeMahieu, I don't believe you need to upgrade your center field position. So if you can have LeMahieu and Brendan Nimmo at the top of your lineup, those 2 guys are on-base machines. Okay, and then you follow it up with Conforto, Alonso, and Dom Smith. And listen, I know everyone's in. I know Steve Cohen wants to win, but he also doesn't have an unlimited budget. And plus the fact, who knows if there's going to be fans in the seats. This guy did not come in to lose, millions of dollars right off the bat. But people are already adding JT Realmuto to the mix here too. I don't know that if you get a DJ LeMahieu and a Trevor Bauer and you make a trade for one more piece that you necessarily need that type of catcher. I think you can get by with a defensive first catcher and bat him in the 9th hole, if you have a DH. But LeMahieu is just, solid with the glove, on-base machine. Him and Nimmo at the top of the lineup, you're going to score almost every first inning in the game. It's going to be tough to pitch around that lineup. But again, it is a blessing in disguise, but in the same respect, it's one season. All right. And it's not the season you would have wanted. You would have wanted that season to come maybe next year. Because listen, Cano hit 310 last year. He had, he had a nice season. He wasn't a horrible player for the Mets, but go when he's 39, I don't know if he's going to put that up. And again, here's the other thing. Now, it's 162. I'm not 100% sure of this, and I actually have email into Major League Baseball because his suspension is supposed to be 162 games, okay? But people are now saying it's a season, okay? So if this is a shortened season, all right, and they play 60, let's say, does the remainder carry over to the following season for 102 games? That's the best case scenario for the Mets. If this is a short season and they count as a season, similar to what they did with the managers, then it's a problem. Because he'll be back next year. You're going to add a piece. If you're looking to get that second baseman, LeMahieu is going to eat up that salary that you just shed. So because that's something.
They said 1 year. They didn't say 162 games, correct? When Hinch got suspended.
Well, yeah, but here's the difference, okay? First offense with PED is 80 games, okay?
Right.
Because that's what he did. Second offense is 162 games, which is a season. So I don't know, I don't know the exact wording. And we also don't know that if the Mariners had some clause, let's see, because he tested positive with the Mariners. And that was already, he had his big contract. So I don't think there's any clause in his contract that said if he tests again, he's out, because, I'm sure that's not part of the deal. So listen, it's going to be problematic for 2 years. At least they got out from it for 1 year. They got 1 year relief.
But if they bring in the universal designated hitter, then you just slide him into the universal designated hitter. Then you got DJ LeMahieu. Again, we're just talking about variables right now, because I know I work
with Smith or Alonso to go in there with the other guy first base.
Right. I mean, listen, it's not a horrible, listen, he'll be 39 coming off the season of not playing. I don't know how effective he's going to be. He actually wasn't bad in the field this year. Listen, a lot of people are down on that trade just because of what Diaz has done. And Cano was injured a couple of times, but he actually wasn't bad. But again, if it frees up the money and you get LeMahieu, listen, he might retire. He might come back at 39 and say, I just don't have it. And, have some sort of buyout. Who knows?
I can think of 24 million reasons why he might not do that.
Right, but we'll see. Let's see if they play, how many games they play this year, and let's get to that and start talking baseball again. It's been tough. It really has been.
No, I know.
Well, ask you a question about Long Island sports, if I may. I know the
Sure.
Nassau Memorial Coliseum. I guess they're not going to use it this year, and now the Islanders are building their new place out by Belmont. Is that correct? So
No, they are going to use it this season. They're not going to use it the following season. Belmont's not going to be ready for this season. It'll be ready for the next season.
Okay, well, I wasn't sure. That's why I'm asking about that.
Yeah.
So thanks for clarifying that. So what are your thoughts about the Nassau Memorial Coliseum? I know that facility, which has been remodeled, still be a facility that they'll be able to keep long term?
Well, listen, it all depends on where we're going with this, because all these places are hemorrhaging money. If you can't do an event, even these small venues. Is the Paramount here, which is just a small club that does comedy. Jim Brewer plays there. His last concert's been postponed 3 times already. Can the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum, listen, to me, the biggest mistake was, Charles Wang, he wanted the lighthouse. That was his thing. He wanted the lighthouse. Madison Square Garden was renovated over the course of 3 seasons, and the Rangers still played there, right? And the renovation was spectacular. The only thing that really was wrong with the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum was the corridors, and it was the easiest fix ever. You could have done all those corridors in an off season. You could have blown out the walls. You could have been doing the construction while the games were going on. It's just building out further, so that the area around the bowl would be accessible. He wanted the lighthouse. That never, took place. The county blew it. And then when they did renovate it, they should have renovated it with hockey in mind. They took out seats. So it's not a viable option for hockey. It could be for minor league hockey, but again, who knows what this economy is going to look like in 2 years from now? Are people going to be spending money are people going to even feel comfortable in 2 years to go indoors? Right now, they say, I think 55% of the people that were surveyed today are not comfortable going to any indoor venues for sports right now.
I can appreciate that. What are your thoughts about the job that Don Mattingly did with the Miami Marlins? He's certainly manager of the year, and by Sporting News as well as a BBWA. So, you talk about a guy that dealt with a lot of COVID challenges. Name a guy that had to deal with them, let alone deal with them as effectively as Don Mattingly did.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Guy is, was he the fifth guy to win an MVP and a Manager of the Year award? So it's pretty interesting. Another former Yankee did that too. Yankee manager Joe Torre did that as well. But listen, 60-game season, I don't know if the Marlins could have sustained that over 162, but you give him credit. And listen, you give Derek Jeter credit as well. And listen, outstanding hire too. It's going to be very interesting to watch, the first female GM in baseball as well. So the Marlins are an interesting story. It's hard to give him, for me, not even a half a season to give a Manager of the Year. Who knows what could have happened if they played 102 more games?
Yeah, but Kim Ng, I was on her media availability a couple of days ago. You talk about a very impressive individual. She definitely is. She really is. I was amazed at how even-keeled, level-headed, and how much knowledge she had. Go ahead, Stuart.
I like the fact that she played stickball in Queens. That's something I have in common with her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, another book that you wrote, Mark, I want to get into about the 73 Mets, because a lot of people have written on the 69, but 73 is almost the forgotten year because it was totally
the 73 is the one I'm working on now with A.J. Carter, the Forgotten Miracle. Absolutely. 69, if you look at that pitching staff, wasn't so much, and the fact that Cleon Jones, who hit over 300, Tommy Agee, you had some really good ball players. That 73 team was not a very good team by any means, and the fact that they made the World Series is amazing. Some cool stories too. In spring training, Willie Mays was AWOL. A lot of things people don't really know about that 73 season. So we're getting into that now. AJ and I are in the research phase of that one. That will be out in 2023. That will be the anniversary book for that team. The book I did with AJ, which was, every author has that one passion project that they get the opportunity to do. And that was a Glove Story, Fathers, Sons, and the American Pastime. And I had coached my son for, 12 years in travel baseball. One of the kids I coached in travel baseball actually made the majors. So travel baseball was a big part of my life with him. And I covered a Met fantasy camp, I'd have to say probably 9 or 10 years ago. At the last minute, the person that was supposed to come with me to take the photographs couldn't come, and my son happened to be on break from college, and he said, I'll go with you. And we were going from station to station, and Josh was a pitcher and a third baseman, in his travel ball days. And so the campers in fantasy camp, they rotate. So it's a draft. So all the coaches are watching, and they're evaluating all the players, and then they write down their notes, and then they have a draft. While the pitchers rotated, Josh got up on the mound and was throwing. And all of a sudden, Josh at that point was 22, and he was bringing it. And you could hear the pop of the catcher's mitt. So all of a sudden, Turk Wendell turned around like, whoa, you don't hear that sound in fantasy camp. So then Turk started showing him some, knuckleball grips and stuff like that. And they hit it off. And as Josh and I were walking away from the pitcher's tube, Josh goes to me, he goes, when I'm 30, because you have to be 30 years old to do fantasy camp. He goes, when I'm 30, we have to do this. So I filed it away in the back of my head. And, at that point, we were only like 2 years removed from, coaching and all that. So it wasn't that, there wasn't that longing for it. As the years go by and you pass these baseball fields and you remember all these memories you had, I started to think, I was wondering, do all fathers, that bond that baseball creates, what is that for other fathers and sons? Because it was such a tremendous part of my life with him. So I reached out to a bunch of the fathers and sons that played, the Griffeys, the McRaes, the Boones, the Bells, Just trying to think who else. Maury and Bump Wills. I think we interviewed like 12 or 13 sets of fathers and sons. And just how them growing up around the baseball field helped the sons become players, and the anxiety level for the fathers watching their sons, knowing what they went through. And then we also wanted to reach out to other people in walks of life to see what baseball meant to them. So one of the original writers from Saturday Night Live, Alan Zweibel, he wrote, and I urge everyone that's listening, and you have to give this a listen. It's called Happy. Just Google Happy by Alan Zweibel. It's probably like a 20-minute play, one-act play. And it just boils down fathers and sons in baseball like perfectly. Then Charles Palminteri, we interviewed him because if you've seen The Bronx Tale, it's his story. And I don't know if you remember the movie, the scene where his father is a bus driver and they turn around at City Island, but every day, if his son was on the bus, they'd get out and have a catch. And Chaz told me that his father was a bus driver and would save up money, and he would always sit in the very last row with his dad at Yankee Stadium. And to this day, whenever he goes to a Yankee game, he's got great seats down, 3 rows behind the Yankee dugout, and all the players always throw him a baseball. Third inning, him and his son Dante make it a point to go up to the upper decks every game. He scans the back row, looks for a father and son, walks over, sits down, spends an inning with them, talks to them, and gives them a baseball from, the one that the Yankees gave. Spoke to Dan Quayle, the vice president, because he was inducted into a Little League Hall of Fame, astronaut Terry Virts. But the spine of the book, and this was AJ's idea, was for Josh's 30th birthday, instead of me finally, as always his coach, we were teammates. And we played 8 games together on the same team. Josh ended up winning the batting championship down there. And it was just one of the greatest experiences of my life. And it's a really good book for, it's a Father's Day gift, or, if your father's still around and baseball is important to you and him, or your son, it's a great read.
What was Dan Quayle like to the vice president, the former vice president, Dan Quayle?
It was pretty cool. I mean, I've interviewed, I've had Mayor de Blasio on our show. I've had, congressmen, but it was weird having to, interview someone and say, Mr. Vice President. But it was cool. It's, in my wildest dreams, my whole life, did I ever think I'd speak to a former vice president? No. So it was cool. And the astronaut, listen, I grew up, the Apollo program and all that was, really big for me. And to speak to an astronaut was pretty cool. Terry Virts is a huge Oriole fan, and he had a great story to tell also. So yeah, it's a fun book for sure. And yeah, speaking to Dan Quayle was a trip for sure.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So as far as I just want to go back to the 73 Mets for a second. One question, and as a Met fan, and I was only 10 when it happened, but
George Stone, Tom Seaver?
Yeah.
We're going to get into that. Yeah. There's a great book by, I'm blanking on his name, and I know him so well. It's Fear and Loathing. Fear and Faith in Flushing.
Greg Prince, we've had him on.
Yeah. So Greg, he's got a whole chapter on it boils it down. Yeah, I don't know what to think. Listen, it was Yogi Berra. That's all you need to know. It was Yogi Berra. It was the stupidest move ever.
I mean, they're saying Seaver kind of wanted to pitch Game 6 and kind of forced his way in. That's what they say. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
I can't imagine that. Listen, and even if he did, he's your insurance policy. It's.
If you save Seaver, then you have Matlack coming out of the bullpen anyway. If something.
That's right. Listen, the A's were a better team. I mean, the fact that even went, 7 is amazing. Anyway, the A's were such a much better team up and down that lineup. The fact that the Mets even made it is beyond belief. Getting through the Reds, the big red machine. It's a miracle. It really is. So I'm looking forward to that project. There's so much going on in New York also at the time. So it's, and we're finding out different things. Listen, when you start doing the research, you find out some really cool things. So like in the 1979 Ranger book, the book starts with the playoffs of 78, where the Rangers got eliminated 1 round against the Buffalo Sabres. I was at the second game, which was the Ranger win in overtime. And I remember that game was like one of my favorite games I have ever attended. There was, Phil Esposito had a fight with Rick Martin, and both were missing the first couple of minutes of overtime. In the overtime, there were goals disallowed from each team. Buffalo scored, it was disallowed. The Rangers scored, it was disallowed. And it was just, so, sometimes your brain, plays tricks on you and you think you remember things. Like for me, for years, until I actually did Love Story, for years, I knew what the date of the first Met game I went to. And I remembered that Art Shamsky hit a grand slam home run in that game. And I knew that Tom Seaver pitched. I always thought it was Tom Seaver versus Bob Gibson. And I thought it was Art Shamsky hitting a grand slam in the 8th inning, to put the Mets up 6-2. The score was right. It was 6-2. Shamsky had a grand slam in the 4th inning. It wasn't dramatic or anything other than the fact that it was a grand slam. And it wasn't Bob Gibson. It was Nelson Briles. So, when I looked all that up, it's like, wow, I was 8 years old. So that 78 game was 18. I still wanted to look up. So I went on newspapers.com and did the research. And I see on the front page of the paper it says, sudden birth, sudden death. Oh no, it said sudden death, sudden birth. And it seems that a woman gave birth at Madison Square Garden in between the 3rd period and overtime. Longtime season ticket holder. She wasn't due for 2 weeks. She went into labor like 10 minutes left in the 3rd period. She didn't know that. She went to the bathroom. She didn't come back. The usher had to go back and get her husband. And I tracked her down and I spoke to the husband, and it was a great chapter in the book. It was just, she was hysterical. Her son, her older son, is actually an NHL agent who was the agent for Brian Leach. So they had a thread where, one of his players is on the Stanley Cup that the Rangers won, but it was a great story. So you find these different things, and we're finding a couple of pretty cool stories about the 73 Mets. In fact, there's a great story. The Mets fined Rusty Staub for coming 2 pounds overweight into, spring training. I think it was like $100. But there's a unbelievable story of Willie Mays. And listen, Willie Mays was one of my idols because, he was one of my dad's idols. So like when my dad took me to the Met games and explained what Willie was to him, and now granted he wasn't the same player, but, Willie played in 52 and here he's playing in 72 and 73, 20 years later, and I can relate to that. I guess it's like kind of Ricky Henderson with me and my son. I saw Ricky play as a young guy and he saw him play as an old guy. But so the story goes that there was this unbelievable, like massive golf tournament in Puerto Rico, and it got all the stars from around the country, like every single, football, baseball players from every single city, the top stars. So from New York, it was Joe Namath and Willie Mays, and they were teamed together, and the two of them were golfing with 2 other, amateurs. Namath showed up like 15 minutes late. And Willie just had a hissy fit. He went berserk and he said, you don't keep me waiting. I'm not golfing with him. So Namath ends up, golfing with Steve Blass. And Willie ends up, golfing with some nondescript football player from the St. Louis Cardinals. I forgot who it was. We've actually tracked him down. So we have an interview set up with him. But it's just like one of those cool things that, unless you were looking through newspapers, throughout the off season, you would have never known that story. So those are some of the things we like to bring out in the books. So we're looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I got to tell you, some interesting stuff about that 1973 Mets team. You talk about Yogi Berra, you talk about Willie Mays at the tail end of his career. And of course, being a Detroiter, the Tigers benefited from Rusty Staub a little bit there. And Joe Namath, obviously a big name in the metropolitan New York area. So these are some pretty interesting stories that even a guy like, Sean Avery started his career out as a Red Wing.
Yes, he did.
And then, of course, we realized that he acclimated quite well to the metropolitan New York area. And from what I hear, he became a character in that area as well, didn't he?
And another Detroit connection, too, his first goal, who got the primary assist on his first goal for the Rangers was Brendan Shanahan. So Shanny got the assist on that goal.
I remember many years ago, Eddie Giacomin finished his career with the Detroit Red Wings, and I used to love watching Eddie Giacomin wander out there and play the puck practically at center ice. I mean, he enjoyed getting his little workout. He got more of a workout for a goaltender than most of them did. Boy, he yandered all over the place, Jockerman.
Yeah. Jockman's first game back, at the Garden was right after he was claimed off waivers, and it's one of the few times that the Garden was rooting for the opposing goaltender.
I remember that. I watched it on TV, and I couldn't believe the standing ovation. But then again, when you're
well
a hero,
deserved.
Yeah, I got to hand it to you folks out in metropolitan New York. When you have a hero, it doesn't matter what jersey they're wearing. That's classy movement. I do remember watching that game on TV as well. So, Stuart, any other things you want to add to the broadcast?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the show you host Sunday nights?
So we've been doing Sports Talk New York for 13 years. We're right now on a hiatus. We're restarting January 6th. The station we were at kind of changed formats like 4 times over the 13 years we were there. So I've decided I'm starting my own internet radio station. It's called 365 Sports, and Sports Talk New York will be on that. We'll be on Sundays at 6 o'clock. We'll be followed by BT Talks Baseball at 7, followed by Carpin's Corner at 8. Followed by Rich Catino's Press Box at 9. So, yeah, we right now have 13 or 14 shows signed up on the network. It's going to be 24/7, hopefully, as we grow, all sports. And you'll be able to get it on your smart speaker. You'll be able to stream it over the internet. You'll be able to go to 365sportscast.com and go to each individual page's web page and, play it there. You'll have apps. So we're looking forward to it. Been doing the show for 13 years, like I said. It's opened up so many doors and just so many different contacts, and never dreamed it would become what it's become. Never dreamed in my wildest life that, that I'd get 7 books done and published. So yeah, it's a passion for sure.
Very impressed. Your own internet radio station?
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Tell me more about that, starting your own internet radio station.
Well, so
people would want to do it.
So here's the thing. Radio has, other than ESPN here in New York and FAN, and the major subsidiaries of those, Sports Talk Radio has become, monopolized by the networks that have their own, TV networks and such. So for the local people, to do radio, it's very expensive. The towers and the permits and everything have become so costly that internet radio is now there's been the paradigm shift. So whereas radio stations became brokers, where if you wanted, like Joe Beningo, who I believe was 25 years here in the New York market on FAN. Joe Beningo, the way he got started at FAN, he went to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. They said, listen, you got to build your brand by going to a local radio station, buying airtime, and even the local radio station's airtime at that point in the neighborhood of $175 to $200 per hour. So then you first have to get sponsors to cover that, or you're just doing it out of your pocket. Internet radio gives you a much larger reach. Our station's going to go worldwide. Plus the fact we're going to be able to be played over all, smart speakers, and I can reduce that, for what someone pays for an hour, for a local small radio station that might go, 2-3 counties, I can give them an hour each week, for a month for less than it would cost them. So it's a moneymaker for if you have a good product like you guys. If you guys went on the air, for $100 a month, you get a sponsor, you're making money. And plus the fact your reach is, you can still do this and simulcast, which is what we've been doing at the radio station, and expand your reach and get sponsors. So that's the model we're building. Like I said, it's going to be a slow, steady climb. And I'm looking for quality broadcasters, people with passion. I'm also looking for young broadcasters because I want to be a mentor, because the thing that I think sets AJ and my show apart is, and I can't show it to you because my computer's on it, but like every day I probably get 10, 15 books from different publishers. I make it a point that I won't have a guest on until I've read the book, from cover to page. In fact, I'll never forget this. It was that's one of the things I pride myself, like my research. That's one of the things that drives my books as well. So we had Jeff Pearlman on, and this was when he did his cowboy book. Right. And about third, fourth question in, it was a question about Troy Aikman. And at mid-sentence, Jeff goes to me, he goes, I got to stop you right there. And the way he said it was like somewhat antagonistic a little bit at first. At least that's the way I construed it. And like my stomach just dropped. I thought maybe, I misremembered something or, and he goes, it's painfully obvious to me. And I go, oh no. He goes, I've been doing this junket for 2 weeks. So the book came out a month ago. And I can tell you were the only person that took the time to read the book. And I really appreciate that you're not just asking me questions that come with the liner notes in the book. I have to commend you. So from that, we've built such a reputation that, I can reach out to the guys that have written the forwards to my book. It's Jiggs McDonald. It's Kenny Albert. It's Ryan Callahan. It's Howie Rose. It's Tim McCarver. And we're a small little radio show, but people know what AJ and I do, and they appreciate it, and they we'll keep in contact with them. And over the course of 13 years, very rarely do we do repeat guests, because I like the new the newness of getting into a different subject. Obviously, there are guests that we have on, John Giannone that covers the Rangers, or, Howie with the Mets. We do have repeats, obviously, but like I said, we just, some of the authors, that come on the show, Carla DeVito is like one of my favorite authors back in the day. Unfortunately he passed away, Phil Pepe, and Eric Sherman. I look forward to all of Eric's books because he comes on all the time. But we love it. And I want to be able to mentor young broadcasters to do it right.
Well, you struck a chord with Phil Pepe. Back in 1981 at the baseball winter meetings, he took me under his wing and taught me a lot of things, and God rest in peace, Phil. I'll never forget the impact he had, and for sure.
He's he's for me one of those full circle moments. Like my 6th grade autograph book had favorite book as a 6th grader was A View from the Rim. Favorite author was Phil Pepe, and to have him on my show all those years later I was blown away by it.
Well, for me to even get started with him, he took a stranger like me, a 19-year-old kid, and spent time with me at the baseball winter meetings. Unbelievable. But you know what, Mark? We're definitely going to have to stay in touch. I do have some questions for you that maybe we can do some stuff together if you're interested. I really would.
Sounds good. I really appreciate it.
Oh, me too. Stuart, you want anything else you want to add at all?
No. Thanks, Mark.
With that said, Mark, why don't you let Stuart let everybody know how they get hold of you? Then we'll let Mark do it as well, and then I'll wrap it up. And again, Mark, I look forward to hopefully building a working relationship with you. You've given me some ideas, and you got my wheels turning in being from the Metropolitan Detroit. When you get somebody's wheels turning like mine, the Motor City Madmouth, my goodness, there's another night's sleep. Thanks to you that I'll lose, but I'm more than happy to lose sleep because of your ideas. Go ahead, Stuart.
All right, I'm Stuart Hack. By day, I have the exciting profession of an accountant. So my book, You'll Never Forget Your First, describes my first 1040, my first 1065, my first corporation.
And your first PPE loan application?
I help people with those, You name it. I'm located in Wellington, Florida now, Palm Beach County. Of course, I'm originally from Forest Hills, Queens, born and bred Met fan. I can be reached 561-214-6171. You can catch me on the web, www.hacktaxandaccounting.com.
All right, Mark, you're next.
All right, so you can check, you want to email me, it's Sports Talk New York, all one word, all spelled out at gmail.com. You want any of the books, go to Amazon, or email me if you want a personalized autographed copy of any of the books, or even go to sportstalknylive.com. You can buy a couple of the books there as well, and I'm on Amazon as well. And check out 365sportscast.com. Obviously, it's you'll see it coming January, but there are some of the shows and some of the information, and you can see some of the shows, the exciting shows we have coming up. And you can follow me on Twitter at SportsTalkNY. And I'm on Facebook with just my name. So lots of ways to get in contact with me for sure.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'll give you my grocery list of contact information. All right. You can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. YouTube channel, we have one too. Okay, South Florida Tribune. Give you 6 reasons why you should go ahead and subscribe to it. We have the Sports Exchange, No Limits, 108 baseball talk, real and the rare, fantasy football, South Florida Tribune podcast. So everybody out there, please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. We have the Motor City Monitor, where we have a Detroit section on there, Promote My Hometown. We also have our media distribution partners on there. We have our local columnists, and more importantly, the broadcaster. Broadcasts can be found on there as well under the WSAN dropdown. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can catch me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. And if you want to hear the audio version of the broadcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So plenty of ways to get a hold of us as well. Mark, I can't tell you how much I've really enjoyed having you on the broadcast tonight. I don't want to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but you know what? I hope we stay in good contact, because I think that there's a potential win-win situation for both of us. So I hope you're fine with that. So
my pleasure. It was a pleasure speaking to you guys. Always, when we can talk about sports during this crazy time, it's always good.
You bet. Couldn't agree with you more. So I'll give the COVID message out there. Let's put it straight for mask up, be safe out there. Don't take any chances. Use some common sense. This virus doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. Cover up, folks. Do the right thing. It'll save you your own health. It also won't cost you as many medical bills if you do the right thing as well. So on behalf of Mark Rosenman and Stuart Hack, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Badmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. God bless everybody. Have a good night. Be safe.